So in counseling, a lot of times you'll see, or in life with friends and family, you'll have somebody who's really struggling in their marriage and say, my marriage is a mess and I'm a mess, or I just feel like I can't be happy, or my life can't go on, I can't thrive if my marriage isn't. So the question is it possible to thrive in a marriage that's not thriving, or a relationship, or a parent-child relationship, in any relationship? How does one thrive when the relationship isn't, especially one as intimate as a marriage? And I'd say the key to that really comes down to not looking for my marriage to give me value and worth, to define my contentment. And in any good relationship, there's a mutual ministry, a mutuality, there's kind of a reciprocalness or reciprocity in how you communicate with one another. But unfortunately, what creeps in is this expectation of return, that I'll do good to you, I'll love you well so that you'll love me well. And all of a sudden, I have expectations in why I love my spouse or why I do the things I do, rather than just loving free of return, free of giving to get. And that's a hard thing for any of us, but I think that's the call of the gospel, is to love without expectation, to love freely, to turn the other cheek, to love even when somebody curses you. And in marriage, to be able to say, I can thrive even if my marriage isn't, because I've learned the secret of contentment. I've learned what it means to be content. I've learned what it means to love God well, and to ask the Lord to help me love my spouse well, despite where my marriage is. Now, the danger in that is when people do come to embrace that their marriage isn't thriving, a lot of times what they end up doing is pursuing other interests, kind of checking out of the marriage altogether, or shutting down, or accepting where it's at, kind of in a fatalistic, deterministic way. And I'd argue that that's not healthy either, that somehow you have to grasp and grapple and struggle with loving my spouse in a way that helps me move towards them, not away from them. So I move towards them without expectation. I move towards them saying, I will do whatever God calls me to do in order to love this person well, and I hope that my marriage will change. I don't give up hope, but I also accept where it's at and ask the Lord to give me grace to know how to move towards that person and love them regardless. Jeremiah Burroughs wrote this book called The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment. And he talks, it's a very rich, excellent book, but he talks a lot about finding contentment regardless of your circumstance in a way that moves you towards God, and relying on, I wish I could remember his quote, but relying on him and giving yourself over to him despite where he puts you. So it's having this sweet, gracious frame of spirit that gives yourself over to God for his disposal. And I'm learning to trust him regardless. He has a neat way of saying, he talks about how do we understand why God allows hard things to happen or evil to happen. And he frames it a little differently than we often hear it. And he says, for the life of the Christian and the non-Christian both, evil befalls us, hard things befall us. But the promise for the believer is that God will remove the evil from it. And I love that, because we often quote Romans 12, and God will work all things out for our good in his glory. But Jeremiah Burroughs says that a little different, that for the believer, he's able to remove the evil from it. So it doesn't mean something's not evil, or it's not hard, or it's not difficult. It means that my promise, my hope is that God can take anything and redeem it. He can use anything for good, and he can take the evil out of it. He can take the sting out of death. He can remove the evil out of a situation for me and redeem it in my life. And that applies to marriage, the difficulties of marriage, the difficulty of hard relationships as well.